Hey everybody, I'm Drew with SplashPages. Welcome back to Terrific Con, and we have the awesome, the extremely deep-toned Benjamin Percy here. Sir, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very good. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. I feel like I should change the tone of my voice too, but I can't. So we're just going to go back to our regular tone. So the first thing that I wanted to bring up is I saw in another interview that you, as a kid, comics was the convenience store rack. If you were good, you'd get to bring some home, and you, right, just like any fan, you read yours to pieces to the point where Scotch tape was included. I have to ask, what was some of the early favorites, and do you still have them, and have you got them signed by any of the heroes then?
I have quite a few of those original comics bought, like you said, at convenience stores, at grocery stores, at flea markets and such. I didn't really have a comic shop until I was in middle school. So they were read to death. And Man-Thing was a favorite back then. So was Warlord, Conan. As soon as Wolverine got into my radar,
right,
it was just a constant buy.
Yeah.
But those early comics, it was whatever was available.
Right.
And so in a way it depended on the store owner.
Right.
And so
of course.
I was drawn though to horror and fantasy especially.
Of course. So speaking of Wolverine, that's, I think, kind of, if I read correctly, that's where you kind of got to start. You started writing for a podcast, right? You started writing podcast stories?
Yeah, and if people hear that offhand, they might think, oh, you hosted a podcast?
No.
Where you're pretending to be Wolverine? It's a TV show for your ears.
Right.
Wolverine The Long Night. I got that gig in 2017, so that's how long I've been writing Wolverine for Marvel.
Right.
There were 2 seasons of that, 2
right.
10-episode seasons. And from there, I got into the X group.
Right. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the podcast stories became a comic series, right?
Yeah, it was crazy popular. And Marvel asked me to do an adaptation of it. It's 5 issues to the 10 episodes.
Right.
So I had to truncate it. I had to condense it. But I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Well, and actually, the artist presented right here.
Oh, there you go. So you also mentioned that, being that you've been doing this for a while, you've worked for Marvel, you've worked for DC, that you've had to deal with adapting long-term storytelling with, fan expectations, attention spans, and whatnot. And I believe in an interview you equated it to, it's not really like juggling, it's like juggling chainsaws.
Yeah,
so how do you do that? I mean, you've been writing for a while. You did X-Force, you were doing Wolverine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you also concluded a very long story with Sabretooth War that you've been building up. How do you, in your opinion, how do you do that? Like, in your way, manage to tell those stories that build over time?
The long-form stories.
Yeah, long-form stories.
The patience of that, comes probably from my experience as a novelist.
Right.
And recognizing early on when I was teaching novels and when I was trying to write them and failing, that one of the things I was doing poorly in that time was treating each of my chapters like its own individual unit, so that my chapter would, raise a problem and solve a problem within those 15 pages.
Right.
And instead, when I started to really break down and analyze successful novels that I wanted to model myself after, I would see how, this problem and this problem and this problem and this problem were juggled all throughout.
Right.
And a chapter would oftentimes conclude with something rising towards a moment of emotional or physical crisis and then cutting away. Unresolved. And so these things, I equate that to juggling chainsaws because, here comes the end of a chapter and you're waiting for that chainsaw to fall and catch it. But then the next chapter begins and a new chainsaw is swinging into view.
Right.
And so I'm doing that with my comics. If you look at X-Force, that Colossus traitor storyline is seated in the very first issue.
Right.
And doesn't end up resolving until towards the end.
Right. I mean, I know
comics fans are very impatient.
They very much are. I mean, I was waiting for you to message back, and I was like, why didn't you do that? And I'm like, oh, okay, good. No, we got that. All right. So the other thing I bring up is one of my recent favorites. Like, I love a lot of your work, but Wolverine Predator was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
And I agree with you. It's just everyone's like, how did it take this long for us to do it? And you yourself...
In my head, it existed all along.
Right, exactly. And speaking of, your past, you are a huge Predator fan. I mean, you reenacted scenes with Nerf guns.
Yes.
You've talked in other interviews how you felt when you were doing it, you relate to the Yakuza in the fact that this is a technologically advanced society, but they still need to kind of disconnect, and they do the hunting to kind of go back to an ancestral kind of primalness, and you yourself sympathize with that kind of. When you disconnect, you turn your phone off, you go on like a walk, you go out camping, woodly.
I try to be as in touch with my primal self as possible.
Indeed. So a lot of mud, a lot of blending in.
No,
so,
I live in the woods. I grew up in a hunting family.
Right.
I, make every effort I can to unplug whenever possible, just because I feel like the noise of this world is not suited to my disposition. My company is best suited for the woods.
Right. Well, I mean, especially on that, adapting it, you telling a story throughout Wolverine's history. And not only that, but you, and again, I don't want to spoil for everybody, but it's been out for months, so I'm really sorry, but go read it. And you even tie in the Predator to Weapon X.
Yeah,
that was whoa, that was amazing.
It was a situation where it's like, is it canon or isn't it canon? I don't know. Like, Marvel never told me, so I tried to write it as though it was canon.
Right.
And you'll see something like that. A moment like the Weapon X helmet and Predator helmet, you'll see something like that happen in Predator Black Panther, which is coming up.
And briefly, just kind of before we get to one of my last questions, you kind of alluded, I overheard a conversation, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, that your next project, which is Black Panther Predator, is going to allude to a third project?
That's correct.
Okay, cool.
Let's just say that this Predator versus universe is all interconnected. So these are not just their own stories.
Okay.
They're building towards an end game.
Oh, that's good.
And
that's awesome.
I've had it in mind from the beginning.
Okay, cool. So also wanted to bring up, you've done a lot of work on Ghost Rider. Most recently, you took the writer out of the extremely ill Johnny Blaze. You put it in Parker Robbins, the Hood, who you said in interviews you kind of sympathized to the late, great Ray Liotta from Goodfellas, and you also took inspiration from Jeff Loeb and the late, great Tim Sale's
That's right.
Long Halloween. So I guess in ways, like, how did that inspire what you're doing? And other thought, how do you feel about that we're going to get the last Halloween, which was just most recently announced with Jeff Loeb and
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the end of the
great.
Long Halloween story. And
I'm
it's
excited.
Jeff and everybody. So, all right, there you go. See, he didn't know, so now...
Breaking news.
Wow, amazing. So,
I love the Long Halloween. I love the way that crime and horror make for such good bedfellows.
They do.
And I wanted to sort of take a cue from that. In the Long Halloween, it's The Godfather that is obviously referenced. So in this case, what's the other greatest gangster movie? Goodfellas.
Boom.
And the Hood is a character who, he's been off everybody's radar for a while. I like doing that. I like taking characters who are sort of on the bench and pulling them in. That's the case with Omega Red.
Right.
And what I did there in X-Force.
Totally.
And so in this case, I was like, all right, the Hood has a goal. He wants to be big time.
Right.
And
here's his ticket.
And yet, he also, despite being a scumbag, cares about his family.
Right.
And so there's that complication. And, and he, wrangles together a deal with Mephisto, who is unhappy with Johnny Blaze.
He's very unhappy.
Because
been unhappy for a while.
Johnny, is controlling the spirit, is guiding the spirit towards, despite all the evil that's done, toward good.
Right.
So essentially, the Hood promises him blood.
Right.
And shit gets crazy in Chicago.
It does. So the last question I have is you worked on Wolverine, you worked on Ghost Rider, you brought them together, which is a great crossover, and you said one of the most interesting challenges was filling in a gap, because we've seen them work together, but we never saw how they met. So that's interesting. So what is it like filling in gaps in Marvel history, and is that daunting in a way?
There's a lot of responsibility involved. In this case, it just seemed staggering that had never happened.
Right.
Despite the number of times we have seen Johnny Blaze and Wolverine on the page together, their first encounter never chronicled.
Right.
So we were able to do that, Jeff Shaw and I. And what I wanted to do was make it a badass scenario that was entwined with the relevance of the right now. That there was a story happening in the present, and there was a story happening in the past.
Right.
And it wasn't just going to be we jack in the box into the past and see this one thing.
Right.
Instead, it should be essential to the current storyline. So people seemed pretty geeked about the Weapons of Vengeance storyline, which is now a standalone graphic novel, and that's what Hellverine sprung out of.
Right. And again, congratulations. Like I said to you yesterday, just got announced as an ongoing series.
Yeah.
You're gonna fuck shit up, so it's gonna be great.
Yeah. I mean, that was supposed to just be kind of like a one-off thing where it's like, here's this awesome idea, boom, slam people with this Hellverine notion, but people got behind it. And, there's going to be a Marvel Legends toy now. There's this ongoing, and I'm running with it. Feels like kind of cosmic Ghost Rider energy.
Indeed, and I can only imagine what'll happen when you see a Hellverine cosplayer. You're going to be...
Oh, man.
Yeah, you're going to be ready.
That'll make my day.
That'll be... Anybody? Oh, okay. No, not maybe later. That's there's a lot of con lab. So, all right, everybody, guys, Benjamin Percy, Hellverine. He's probably got some other stuff that he can't talk about.
I do.
Yeah, there you go. So we'll find that out later. But seriously, everybody, check him out. Stay tuned for more Terrificon. Thank you so much, and fucking metal.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Hey, so